Hi, my name is Mitch Black. I'm the president of Mobi Wireless, and today I'm going to be speaking about enterprise mobility, its trajectory, and best practices. This presentation is being given at the Aotmp conference in Orlando, Florida, the week of February 10th. I'll cover a lot of different subjects today that focus on enterprise mobility, some of the trends that we're seeing, some of the best practices, some of the things that we've seen that have worked to address enterprise mobility in the corporate environment, as well as some other subjects that may not have worked. So if you look at this first slide, mobility is evolving at a huge pace. One of the statistics that's interesting, if you look at, there's basically a cellular phone that's been designated to every person that lives in the United States. Approximately 300,000 subscribers now have cellular phones in the US. Additionally, there's 285,000 tablets that were in use at the end of 2013. So when you look at this from a corporate perspective, about 50% of employers today will require their employees to supply their own devices by 2017. No doubt everyone's heard about BYOD. This is one of the continuing trends. It'll be a subject of this particular presentation and obviously this event this week. Another interesting statistic is that mobile data traffic has increased and will continue to increase by 7 times in the year 2018. And so what that means when you look at a proliferation of all of these different devices and you take into account that things such as machine to machine account for almost 17 billion different devices, the amount of data traffic is staggering. How to manage that, how to ensure that you're getting the best possible prices when acquiring that type of service are incredibly important. So anyway, wanted to start out, shock everyone with a bunch of big numbers. Moving on, one of the areas that the enterprise looked at initially was focusing on security. Because there was such a large proliferation of devices, people were bringing their own devices into the workplace. For the longest time, our friends out of Canada, BlackBerry, had developed a solution, a device, and a stack that effectively secured the corporate environment and those people connecting with the corporate systems from a wireless perspective. Well, as people began to migrate away from BlackBerry, the need to secure those devices and corporate data became even more paramount. So the MDM world was really born. BlackBerry continued to focus on their platform and their devices within their own ecosystem, but other companies such as AirWatch, MobileIron, Afaria really began to capture a new area of the market in terms of providing a software solution that enabled that security. So one of the interesting things when you look at MDM, when companies first adopted mobile device management solutions, there really was a lot of unknown around how to support that. They had known how to do it within a BlackBerry environment. And there was all of these different companies, people that came from the IT services side, people coming from the mobility side that said, hey, we can help you support and install MDM. Most corporations got confused. There wasn't a lot of consistent nomenclature around what services meant. So subsequently, a lot of companies went ahead and made these decisions, whether it was an on-site premises version of an MDM or a cloud-based service, to implement it and support it themselves. What we're now finding is that's created a lot more work. So IT departments now are spending more money and supporting their clients in ways they hadn't before, even in a BlackBerry environment with MDM. And subsequently, it's created a little bit more confusion and complexity in an enterprise mobility environment. The other thing, and I mentioned this earlier, was BlackBerry migration. I think most of you who are listening to this right now probably in some way, shape, or form have utilized BlackBerry. And the biggest buzzword in our space right now in the services side of the business is BlackBerry migration. Everyone's moving away from it. They're dead. Obviously, I think they believe that there's still more opportunity in the future. But so it's very, very important that most companies have had to address migrating away from BlackBerry for their mobility needs. And subsequently, like I mentioned earlier, the MDM was somewhat of the first adoption space was, let's get an MDM so if we have all of these executives and now all of these other employees that are bringing iPhones and Android devices into the workplace, we need to make sure that we secure that. But at the same time, we have corporations that may have tens of thousands of BlackBerry devices. They also utilize a BES server, and they're moving completely away from that environment. And subsequently, that's a very, very daunting task. And so a lot of companies are beginning to look for help. How can you help me move tens of thousands of users, devices, software to a whole new type of mobility support mechanism? And subsequently, there's going to be a lot of opportunity in this space for companies to take advantage of that migration. So let's talk about BYOD. Everyone wants to talk about it. It's the acronym of the day, the year, the last couple of years. You're beginning to see other different versions of BYOD. I just saw yesterday BYOC, bring your own cloud, in addition to BYOD. So everyone's trying to jump on this bandwagon. It's the new Y2K, if you will, for those people that remember that. But BYOD is actually where people want to bring their own device in. They want to make sure that they have the device that's going to make them the most productive. And the iPhone is really what initiated this. You take into consideration the iPhone was probably a very big disruptor to the enterprise space, and it may have been too late for BlackBerry to begin making some of the changes they needed to support a type of BYOD a BYOD program. So the iPhone started this. Then you talking about MDM earlier, all of these different things play into BYOD. There's a lot of HR policies involved in BYOD, but the one thing that we have seen at Moby is that supporting BYOD is more expensive than most people think. I know recently Gartner had distributed a report that said it cost around $300 a year for an IT department to support one BYOD user. So there is more complexity associated with it to address BYOD. Ultimately, it's not a matter of when, it's how soon will companies begin to adopt more BYOD policies and enable it further. We think it's going to happen quite a bit over the next 5 to 10 years, and as a result of that, it's going to create more complexities in the enterprise mobility IT departments. So one area we talked about earlier was MDM, and there's a certain type of solution within MDM, and that's called containerization. And I think most people are very aware of that. You've heard the term dual persona, of where a device has a business side of it and a personal side of it. The containerization, though, is really solutions like Good had started quite a while ago. I meant Good Technologies, of where they can take all of the corporate data, all of the corporate email, and containerize that within the device. And subsequently, if a user decides to leave the company, they have the ability to simply wipe that device clean. So containerization became an easy solution, although the application itself and the usage of the device early on was not widely liked by most users. It's somewhat, I'll use the term kludgy, but nonetheless, it really accomplished a key goal of corporate IT, and that was securing the corporate data and their ability to take that away if something would ever happen, and that the end user then could still have all of their personal information separately stored, their own personal messaging and so forth was still there. It was just segmented, if you will. So once again, that trend does create a fair amount of complexity, especially from the end user's perspective. So that being said, let's move on to another subject here. It's kind of the alphabet soup of the enterprise mobility space. So right now, and I probably didn't mention this early on, for those of you that do not know, the company that I work with today, Moby Wireless, we're a managed mobility services provider. So we're that company where companies outsource their support. There's software associated, there's managed services associated with it. We essentially support mobile environments for corporations. But we're just one of those many acronyms within that enterprise mobility ecosystem. There's MDMs, we talked about them earlier, mobile device management companies. And then there's MAMs, mobile application management, the ability to distribute mobile apps, to automate those and so forth. Those are all part of this ecosystem. So what you're beginning to see now is corporate IT needs to support all of these different segments of mobility. And there's not really one throat to choke, if you will. Some companies will insource a lot of the support, or they may decide they want to be the administrator for the MDM and the MAM. Other companies want to outsource all of that. And there's really not a company today that really does all of this. You find a lot of big system integrators that got into this business, and they will bring different partners in under one umbrella, if you will. But ultimately, no one really owns this space, and there's a fair amount of confusion. So as a company that's in a space today like Moby is with MMS, A lot of people confuse us. They'll talk about, oh, we've got MDM, we've got enterprise mobility management covered with MDM, or we've got our application management covered. We've got everything covered for storage and support. We have our own help desk. Well, that's not necessarily always the case. Complexities are created. Think about everything that we just talked about a few minutes ago, whether it's BYOD, MDM, application support, so forth and so on. There's so much complexity associated with this. The mobility management services area itself, as Gartner says, will scale from a $500 million industry in 2013 to almost a $3.4 billion industry in 2016. So as we sit here talking to you, representing the Aotmp group today, we see a lot of opportunity for us to support corporate America. And this is still a new industry, but at the same time, it's moving so incredibly fast. And one of the things that you can take a look at, we actually have a copy at our booth of a white paper that we co-authored called Enterprise Mobility Management Defined. Fascinating report. Please pick it up, download it from our website. I think you'll find it very, very interesting, and we're always here to answer your questions if you do have them. So, taking into consideration everything with enterprise mobility trends, everything going on, let's talk a little bit about trends. What's next? What's coming next? What are we beginning to see in the enterprise mobility management space? One of those is consolidation. As I mentioned earlier, there's not really one company that delivers a true end-to-end solution for enterprise mobility. Like we said, MDM, MAM, MMS, all of that. So you're beginning to see companies coming together and becoming a much more end-to-end type of business. So also at the same time, you see incumbent IT companies in the software space that know that mobility is where the future is. And look, just a couple of weeks ago, VMware acquires AirWatch for $1.5 billion. Last year, we also saw a company that's represented here this week as well at Aotmp, Calero, that was formed via the merge of 3 different companies. IBM buys Mass 360 last year. AirWatch, previous to getting acquired, acquires Motorola Solutions MMS Group as well. So all of these companies are coming together to try to deliver an end-to-end solution. We see that trend continuing in our space. So as people that are out there in the IT world, in the telecom world, trying to figure out what's going to happen, it's going to be moving pretty fast. There's going to be a lot of new companies emerging, or maybe some of your incumbent service providers being acquired along the way. So another interesting area that we're beginning to see is the emergence of enterprise MVNOs. I think most people, when they think of MVNOs in the US market, think about consumer brands that have gotten into the wireless space, especially in the prepaid segment with companies like Virgin Mobile and TracFone that have been wildly successful in terms of segmenting a consumer offering and really going to market with a very, very tight value proposition associated with it. Therein lies an opportunity for enterprise as well. So when you look at MVNOs in the enterprise space, it's very, very complex. And to date, I can't think of a company that has emerged or effectively done that. But now we're beginning to hear about companies that are forming. Some of these are pre-IPO companies. Some of them are just recently funded by VCs. And at the same time, there's rumblings within the large system integrators of them wanting to become a enterprise MVNO. So it's more than just, hey, I'm going to offer you airtime, but it's also providing a full range of value-added services that include expense management, MDM, mobile application development, and a variety of other services. So it's something to keep your eye on. Like I said, it's an emerging space right now, but nonetheless, I think it's one that will be very interesting and will have an impact on the enterprise mobility space over the next 3 to 5 years. Another area, when you talk about enterprise mobility, and to a certain degree it's at Moby, we kind of fall into this camp that I'm going to talk about. Most of our services have been targeted for the larger enterprise, of where we can come in and because we can optimize a large corporation's bills, for example, their wireless bills, because they utilize a multitude of different operators. And at the same time, they have a lot of complexity. So a lot of people have really honed in on how can I help the large corporations? Well, At the same time, you have a lot of smaller mid-market companies, people that have 500 employees or even 100 employees, and they're dealing with a lot of the same type of issues. They have security issues. They have BYOD issues. Now, they may not necessarily swing a big stick with the carrier in terms of volume and revenue that they generate for that particular carrier, but nonetheless, they have these issues. MDM, without a doubt, has been able to penetrate that small to mid-market business. And you think about it, AirWatch made this public. They have 10,000 customers. My guess is not all 10,000 of those customers have 2,000 lines or more in their corporate environment. Most of them are small. And subsequently, I think you're going to begin to see some of the trends moving forward are how can companies in the application management space, in the managed mobility space, serve that particular client base. So more and more there's going to be a movement towards that. And it may have different types of go-to-market strategies. It may not necessarily be direct sales, large system integrator sales. It may be through channels and so forth and so on. So keep your eye on that. I think there may be some people that are listening to this right now that are in that mid-market to small business space. Rest assured, help is on its way. So let's talk a little bit about best practices. And what I'm going to share with you right now are a lot of the best practices that we have seen at Mobi, and also just some of the things that we've seen in the industry as well on how companies have addressed some of their enterprise mobility management needs and really what the results of those have been. One, I'm going to use an example. Obviously, we can't throw logos out and talk about specific companies, so you can just read between the lines here. How about we have an auto manufacturer that needed to maintain visibility into 14,000 lines. Here was a company that really didn't know exactly where every single user was. And one of the things that a managed mobility services provider such as Mobi Wireless does is typically you have an integration with a corporation via a SaaS software solution that gains us access to an HR database. So we know who's using the phones. In this particular case, through this process, we were able to uncover that there were 600 devices being used by non-employees in the organization. So literally, this company was paying for 600 people to use their cellular phone bill for essentially free. Then you look at all the different integrations that are required with a multitude of wireless carriers. So in this particular case, you almost had close to $800,000 in wireless monthly spend through 4 different carriers. How do you optimize that? How do you manage that? And then you have a lot of support visibility issues. You almost have 800 monthly program changes and activities and 500 help desk calls. So one of the things that Managed Mobility was able to provide in this particular case, a solution from Mobi, was centralizing all of that information, and the cost savings was rather significant in terms of I can give you a direct ROI now and say because of your investment in this particular solution, here's the return on this investment. But it's also the reporting and the visibility and everything that goes along with that. It truly took an incredibly fragmented process and simplified it immensely. So there's your best practice number 1. Best practice number 2, deploying ready devices. The example here is a leading provider of digital television rolled out thousands of ready-to-go devices. And a lot of people, and kind of thinking back even to BlackBerry migration, when you have to move a multitude of devices at one time, it can be very daunting. In this particular case, let's say it's 1,000 different types of Samsung devices that were going to be deployed with very specific applications preloaded on them into a field sales organization. This required logistics, very customized fulfillment, and where the hardware had to be packaged and kitted with very specific accessories that might be used for things such as payment processing, extended battery time, things of that nature. And then there had to be software configured that also had an MDM solution preloaded into it. And then the employees would receive a fully functioning, ready device right out of the gate. You had a help desk there to support them, to walk them through that. And there was an automated process in the fact that all of those assets were tracked. The old assets were taken back and actually recovered. And by the way, another thing that we haven't talked about there today is device recovery. And that's a big part of that full lifecycle management that is now required to be an effective managed mobility services provider. So best practices number 3, how to continually optimize mobility spend. So in this particular case, this was an automotive sales company that insures their and about $360,000 in monthly spend that requires optimization. In this particular case, this client had 5 different carriers in the U.S. They needed an HR feed to synchronize and ensure that all approved employees would carry a corporate liable device. And as a result of this, there was $3,000 in direct savings from correcting the feature set for an employee traveling internationally. So a lot of times what you have is you've got situations of where you have no visibility into roaming charges. And if you have a customer that's going to be, or excuse me, an employee that may have to go overseas, when you work with someone that's providing you these managed services or you're doing it yourself, you need to be proactive as opposed to reactive. And in this particular case, that proactivity was able to save them a considerable amount of money on roaming. And this is something that a device management solution cannot automate at this point in time, and that's where you need to have someone that has that expertise in the wireless service aspect and how to optimize this. It's not really what I would consider to be the core true wireless expense management, but it's really a highly value-added wireless optimization that encompasses expense management. So if I confused you, I apologize, but just another way to say there's all sorts of different ways to optimize a mobility spend. Best practice number 4, BYOD migration. How a 130,000 employee organization is migrating its employees from BYOD. So in this particular case, this company has a large number of CL users. They're moving over the next 3 to 5 years almost to an exclusive BYOD program. Now at this point in time, BYOD is voluntary with manager approval. There's a flat stipend associated with it, and international charges will be reimbursed. But it requires an enrollment, an approval process, all of the policy acceptance, and then the company on the back end is going to need comprehensive reporting to enable program availability, as well as cost allocation to manage the stipend. In this particular case, this is a global client that requires multilingual support. So if you have a help desk in this particular case and you're insourcing it, you're going to need to manage that in a multilingual type of program. And in this particular case, they outsourced this to us, and we were able to create everything that they needed to manage this huge migration. And even within that, there's a solution set that's going to allow, in this particular case, Mobi, to move from CL to IL and actually offer an e-commerce type solution for that employee to go onto our portal and then click a link that will actually take them to a website that will have all of the different devices they may want to get from Verizon or from AT&T or from T-Mobile or Sprint. And because they were an employee of this large corporation, they would also get a discount on their individual liable program. We manage all of that. Within that, we ensure the MDM is downloaded, BYOD policy is accepted, and then they have a help desk to support that entire process for them on that particular day of the acquisition of that device, and on an ongoing basis if it relates to ensuring that their email is connected, ensuring that they have access to Salesforce.com, for example. So that's incredibly important. It's not just taking a device that's corporate liable and giving them a new device. Much, much more involved in it than that. So that's a big, big step. One of the other practices I want to talk about is MDM implementation and administration. And I mentioned this at the very first part of the presentation around how many people went out and just grabbed an MDM and really didn't take into account the administration support that was required. And this is an example I'll use of a financial services company that had to ensure an optimized, secure usage of their data on mobile devices. And what we really did is we provided a one-time outsourced implementation guidance. They came to us, and in our particular case, we're an MDM neutral organization. And we thought through discovery, we determined what's the right device management solution for them. And that wasn't just it. It was also, how do we manage it on an ongoing basis? If I have a problem with my login or an issue with my device, who do I call? And at the same time, if an employee leaves, do I wipe that device clean? How do I manage that process? It's something that we were able to put together as well for them. It falls all within the scope of managed mobility, but in this particular case, MDM administration becomes a big, big part of that. So right there, that was just some of the best practices that we've seen. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and a little bit more about Mobi. We have a the company today, the way we see managed mobility, huge growth area. We talked about the big numbers earlier, but Mobi itself, we're still a relatively small company, but we're an important player in this particular space. One of the nice things about the company, and we're very proud to represent here, is the fact that we are an Aotmp Efficiency First certified partner. We received that accreditation back in September of 2013. We have a technology platform that's built with a multitude of integrations. So our software, and I mentioned this earlier, we integrate this right into our corporate clients, but on the back end we have integration points with a lot of the major carriers, the MDM players, and other connection points that really makes us the technology hub where in a single pane of glass a corporation or an administrator within that corporation can manage their entire mobility environment. And then we support that with a variety of managed services such as wireless expense optimization, logistics and fulfillment, white glove help desk support that's specifically tailored to a corporate client's needs. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Mobi, please visit our booth, take a look at our website, download some of the white papers that we have, and feel free to ask any questions that you might have. So I hope everyone has a great time here at the Aotmp conference this week. There's a multitude of other tracks that you're going to want to take a look at. There's tracks this week on mobile strategy, BYOD, driving innovation through mobile technology, and controlling the data, not just the device, all of that right here. So if there's not any questions, we'll go ahead and move forward. Thanks again, and have a good day.